Today we're going to be talking about the major rules on when you should and shouldn't be texting your ex. Now, I've been analyzing breakup text messages since 2012, and I'm pretty sure I have a pretty good handle on when you should be texting your ex and when you shouldn't be texting your ex. But it is always good to have a back to the basics primer, and that's what this video is going to be. We're going to be looking about when you should and when you shouldn't text your ex. And what we're going to do is divide this video into two distinct parts. Part one is going to be dealing with situations in which you should be dealing with your ex, specifically the three core situations in which you should be responding or texting your ex. Part two is going to deal with those situations that you shouldn't be texting your ex in. So we're going to be looking at the three core situations in which you should not be texting your ex. So let's just jump right into it. When should you be texting your ex? Well, the first situation in which I think it is a good idea to text your ex is if you've completed a no contact rule successfully and outgrown them. Now, throughout the history of my website, my podcast, and this YouTube channel, I've talked a lot about the no contact rule. And specifically, it's gone through a lot of different definition changes. Originally, it was just simply a selfish manipulation tactic, if we're being honest, right? You use the no contact rule, ignore your ex, make them miss you. But over time, it has evolved into a transformational, evolving situation, I guess, in which you come out the other end better than when you started it. So what is the official definition of the no contact rule? Well, it refers to a period of time where you cut off all conceivable communication with an ex after a breakup. Now, the intent of this tactic should not be used to make your ex miss you, but instead should be used to rebuild your own life so that you can actually outgrow your ex. And by doing this, the no contact rule can have that added benefit of making an ex miss you. This is something that we picked up when we actually really started paying attention to success stories and the patterns that we noticed developing within them. Many of our most successful clients tended to get to this point emotionally where they weren't quite sure if they even wanted their exes back anymore. And they usually did this during the no contact period. And I think it gives you a certain amount of leverage if you are finishing up a no contact rule and you don't care about if your ex is going to respond to a text message from you. If they reach out with a text message to you, how quickly they're responding to your text messages, it gives you just leverage. You don't really care so much about your ex. Sure, you're interested in talking to them and potentially remaining friends or seeing where things go if that's the route you want to go, but you're not going to be broken if things don't work out in that way. And so I don't think you should be trying to talk to your ex until those two things have happened. Number one, you've completed a successful period of no contact. And number two, during that no contact, you've gotten to this place emotionally where you have outgrown your ex. So try not to talk to them before you get to that place. Of course, that's what we are always preaching here. Situation number two is you've gotten into the pattern of building strong rapport back and forth. Momentum is a very real thing that's often glossed past when you're looking at text messaging. Often when you look at texting, most of our attention goes to those initial barriers for entry. So the first contact text message. But not enough time goes into teaching you how to keep the fire going. In fact, a few years ago, a member of our private Facebook support group actually pointed this out. Her question was pretty simple. How do you transition from first contact text messages to actually rapport building type text messages? Does anyone have any good examples of rapport texts? Now, luckily, there was a lot of people who responded to her question, actually over 65 people. And they had some really good suggestions, but I'm particularly partial to this one. So here is a real life response to this question from one of our other clients who says, I've tailored some of my initial rapport building reach outs based on my ex. I'm trying to figure out what lynda.com learning series to do next. Any suggestions? Don't you just love that feeling after a good workout? Sore, but you know it means it's working. I just started watching a new show on Netflix I think you'd like. So the thing that I want you to notice about all of these type of examples is they actually are conversation starters, but they aren't actually conversations at all. They're sort of the initial barrier of entry getting into a conversation. And they're all based around an ex's interests. We know from lots of research that exes love talking about themselves or their interests more than anything else. And so the goal with rapport building is comically simple. It's to have a memorable conversation and string together lots of these these memorable conversations. And so while a lot of our attention goes into the first contact text message after a breakup, we also need to put a certain amount of attention on the first contacts to get a rapport building started. And the goal here is, if you've gotten this rapport building started between you and your ex, you're having conversations, they're either neutral or positive, and your ex is reaching out to you and you're reaching out to them, it's okay to reach out to them. You should be reaching out to them. But the important thing I want to leave you with is, don't reach out to them without some type of North Star, some type of overarching goal on where you want to end up. Because too often I see people just sort of think they can build rapport without really realizing what rapport building sort of building blocks there are to create that rapport building conversation. So make sure you have that North Star.
Real quick, I want to say that if you're new to this YouTube channel, or you're trying to figure out what you should be doing to get your ex back, and you're trying to learn if you even have a chance in your specific circumstance, probably the smartest thing for you to do is actually stop by our website, www.exboyfriendrecovery.com, or take our Ex Recovery Chances quiz that can be found at exboyfriendrecovery.com. Now, if you're watching this on YouTube, taking that free quiz is super easy to do. All you have to simply do is look in the description link below this YouTube video and click on the link you see there. It will take you directly to the quiz where you can fill it out and get an easy answer on what you should be doing going forward, and overall what your chances look like in your specific situation. All right, so let's get you back to the video.
And the third situation in which we think it's okay for you to reach out or talk to your ex through text message is if they reach out to you first in a positive way, post no contact. Now, the key word here is that it's post no contact. That means we aren't looking at a situation where it's okay to respond to an ex during no contact if they reach out to you. We're looking at a situation where they reach out to you positively after a no contact rule is completed. And honestly, there's not too much more to add here, so I'm just going to move on to more important situations, specifically the fun stuff, when you should not be texting your ex. Okay, so I'm going to make this really simple. Before we kind of get into the three core situations where you shouldn't be texting your ex, I'm going to be honest with you. Probably 90% of my time spent talking to clients and explaining to them why they shouldn't be texting their ex is in the following situations. Once again, I feel it's really important to point out that as a general rule of thumb, you shouldn't be texting your ex at any point throughout the value ladder other than the point that's specifically dedicated to the texting phase. That means do not be reaching out to your ex during a no contact rule. Do not be reaching out to your ex immediately after a breakup. Things like that. You should be reaching out to an ex and starting the text phase when the text phase in the value ladder component actually comes into play. The only exception here is if you're forced to do a limited version of no contact. But most people don't fall into that category. And if you're most people, just stick to the general rule of thumb. Okay, so let's talk about the situations. Situation number one in which you should not be talking to your ex or texting your ex is the day after the breakup. We know based on experiences that our average clients tend to have anxious attachment styles. This means this person typically requires a lot of attention and affection. They like to feel really close to their partners. It's not uncommon for them to want to spend every single day with them. And the core wound of them is that they have a deep fear of abandonment and they're afraid of being alone. And so that's what ends up usually triggering their anxious behaviors in relationship. Now, here's the thing about anxious people who get broken up with. They tend to react in a pretty desperate way, and it's understandable. The entire world, or rather their entire world, revolves around this relationship, and often so much of their identity is wrapped up in it. Anxious people at their core tend to be problem solvers. And it makes a lot of sense that when a problem solver notices a problem, they believe they need to do everything possible to solve that stinking problem. With this in mind, immediately after a breakup is such a circumstance. And more often than not, we found our clients' exes actually tend to be avoidant. So what you get here is this anxious person who thinks there's a problem that they need to fix, as I pointed out earlier, and they try to fix the problem immediately after the breakup. And this in turn just pushes the avoidant person away because the anxious person is doing the very thing that an avoidant is annoyed afraid with the most, and that is a lack of space. You got to read into that what you will. So let's move on to the second situation in which you should not be contacting your ex. And that's if your ex contacts you in the middle of a no contact rule. Seems so simple. I mean, this is like a very basic component, but you'd be surprised at how many people fail this. Our estimation is that close to 80% of our clients will fail a no contact rule at least one time in their process. Why? Well, I actually wanted to do something kind of fun here. And so I went to our private Facebook support group and found a real life text that an ex sent to one of our clients during their no contact rule to show you how tempting it can be to break a no contact rule. So what we have here, just to set the situation, is an ex who was broken up with and found our program and decides she is going to implement a no contact rule on her ex. And in the middle of the no contact rule, her ex sends her this. I want to reach out and say a lot, but I know we're not ready to be friends just yet. I'm not, at least. I think about, care, and miss you. I need to get that off my chest. I'm sorry I cut all other forms of contact like I did. I had to. I was going to become dishonest if I didn't. I won't do that to you or to who I'm seeing. If you hate my guts, I understand. You haven't called, texted, or emailed, so I figure you're doing all right. Kay, yeah, back to the road for me. This is a real text message that one of our clients got. The irony here is she was using a no contact rule on him, and he was kind of using a no contact rule on her, and he broke down first. Now, when you see a text like that, it's super tempting, especially if you have an anxious personality, to want to play the mother role, to want to solve the problem, to make them feel better. But it's important that you don't do it. The point of the no contact rule is you're not supposed to rehash your relationship. It's about your own personal growth. It may seem cruel to some, but I think those people that look at it that way, they have the wrong mindset. If your ex loves you like you hope they do, they can wait for you a bit. And right now, in my mind, in the middle of a no contact rule, your focus needs to be focused on healing and evolving as a human being. That's it. And that leads us to our third and final situation, which is immediately after they reject you post no contact. Now we come to probably the most common situation in which our clients make mistakes in texting their ex. Let's say you've done everything I've recommended. You completed a no contact rule successfully. You've sent your initial text, got a positive response. You've even had some modest progress in the texting phase. But somewhere along the way, you've overstepped and your ex becomes standoffish or even negative in their interactions with you. We know from experience that avoidant exes are very likely to do this at some point. And we found that when that happens, the worst thing you can do is actually to continue pushing. Instead, I want you to live by this mantra. When they pull back, I pull back. It probably goes against every fiber of your being, but I can't tell you how many times I've seen this approach work on fearful avoidance in particular. So just to recap, if your ex becomes cold during conversations they were previously warm, instead of trying to fix the problem, instead of trying to push, do the opposite of what you expect. Pull back, give them space, allow them to have enough space so that they're willing to come back to you and then restart the conversation. I use a fishing analogy a lot when I talk about dealing with fearful avoidance or men or women who do this. They kind of seem like they've gone cold. They kind of seem like they've rejected you when things seem to be going so well. They're doing the hot and cold game. The biggest mistake most people make is reading too much into the cold moments and not realizing that usually when you're getting a cold moment, that ex is hitting this internal barrier and they're fighting against it. And the worst thing you can do is continue to pester them.